So, welcome everybody to the JupyterLab weekly meeting. I'm Frederick, one of the dev of JupyterLab and former software steering representative of JupyterLab. We have a small committee here today, and I don't know if somebody else wants to introduce before I move to the agenda. So I'll be quiet for some minutes.
Yeah, I think we have a couple of new people on the call. So would anyone who, like, this is your first, if this is your first Jupyter meeting, would you like to come off mute, turn your camera on if you want, and say hi to the group? Not hearing any volunteers today. That's okay. Well, Frederick, would you like to? You're the first person on the agenda, so you want to go ahead?
Sure. So just to list them out, that's the list of PR that are needing review. The two first are from me. The first one is in Lumino, not in JupyterLab, and the three last are on Mike side, so I won't comment too much on that. The first one on Lumino is to make the application, so it's the base object behind the main object in JupyterLab, more composable. So just to be able to theoretically change the command registry when you create an application or change the context menu. So just like make Lumino fully pluggable as it is possible. And the second one, basically it's a depend-about PR for bumping the package that's WebSocket. We don't use it in the front end. We use it only in test. The reason I'm asking for a review is because we need to do some dirty trick because at some points in that package they tune the meta information of the package, saying that if you are in a browser context, that package shouldn't be used. So you don't receive any JavaScript asset, it just raised an error. So basically, we need to, like, the only trick I figure out from the internet and from suggestion of the package author is like changing dynamically the package JSON. So yeah, it's a bit dirty. It works, but yeah, just so I would like another pair of eyes to look at that one to see if there is nothing too weird or if there is other ideas to have a workaround on that. And for the others that are from Mike, so maybe I leave Mike after if he wants to do some comment about that, as I see he has also a point in the agenda. And other than that, I wanted to point out one of the PR that a student from the Google Summer of Code has opened that aim to replace button by button from the toolkit. And one of the questions that Mike has raised when having a first look is that should it be for the 3 or 5.0? I know it's gonna create some tension, as Mike mentioned, about CI automation and team, but I definitely want to move to 4.3 because I want to highlight why using the toolkit will improve, in particular, accessibility. So let me share my screen. Where is my screen? I can never share Firefox. Strange. So, okay. Can you see my screen now?
Yes.
Thanks, Jason. So what you can see here on the left is a demo of the components that are in the toolkit. And so everything that's on the left are from the toolkit, and I just pick up one of the most crowded UI that we get with plenty of different type of components is the settings editor. Just to give an example, I have also a notebook. But what I want to highlight is one of the advantage of that toolkit about accessibility is like if I now switch eye contrast to eye contrast mode in my operating system. So this is what's happening. So for example, you can see that we still have some blue and some highlights that are seen in the left in the toolkit. The contrast is maybe a bit less important, and it may feel a bit weird by time to time for what we have. And one of the things that we don't have for sure is that, for example, if we do that, so we can see that the button in the dialog they are kind of totally lost, like without eye contrast. And by switching them, for example, we'll have some highlight also in eye contrast mode from the operating system. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I really like it. And if we even move a bit further, we hopefully get more things. Like one of the things that you can see here in the toolkit is the tab has a very high contrast to know which one is active. And for now, like there is no way of knowing which one is active by looking at just the tab. So that's one of the things that using more and more the toolkit should help. Of course, slowly progressing, but yeah, that's why I think that the cost of switching is worth.
I know you'd mentioned like 4.3 or 5.0. We just crossed about a year since 4.0 came out. And I was curious, like, do we have any idea of what a timeline would be for a 5.0 release? Is it going to be later this year? Is it going to be next year? I feel like this hasn't come up. We've kind of danced around it.
Yeah, that's also my fear that if we move that PR to 5.0 is for now pushing it to an unknown date, basically.
Yeah, it's like that's my concern is that I don't want JupyterLab 5.0 to be this sort of mythical thing that we may not get to anytime soon.
On the other side, what is the extent of breakage and how we can minimize that? And I think that the greatest problem is that whenever there is any automation or an extension which depended on the button being there, it's no longer a button, it's a JP button, right? It's a different element in the node, in the DOM tree.
So from the test point, that may break some CI. I have to answer for that. I have an answer that says normally in modern testing, if you look at all the library, if it's testing library or integration test with Playwright and whatever, they emphasize that tests should be using accessibility picker. And so having a GP button or a button is the same because basically they have a button role, and so it makes no difference. Like the naming and the role makes the picker pick the same element. But it may require code of some extension to be changed because not all extension are using the latest trend of picker in the test. So that's for sure. The other thing that I'm unsure for now in the PR is I asked Meag to change also the current button component that we have in the UI component package. And maybe this is a bad idea. Maybe that one we should keep it as is because it's one of those components that are probably reused in some extension. And so changing that to a GP button with another way of styling it will probably break more extensions. So maybe in that PR, we should keep the UI component button and depreciate it, and yeah, and only changing like internal buttons of core. So yeah, that's what I'm seeing, like thinking.
When you describe the benefits and costs like that, it sounds good to me. I just wonder whether we should do some test run and see if there is anything that extension authors would need to do to.
Yeah.
So are any of these new components replacing existing classes that were exported from JupyterLab itself? Because we have a button component, and there's a couple of different buttons actually.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons of the PR. There is one from the UI component that I presume is what we have to advertise, like being the reference. So that's what I was thinking, that maybe that one should stay the same so that it won't break the extension. And just internally, we don't reuse it and we depreciate it, saying in the deprecation warning for the extension authors, okay, we have moved on to a new component that comes from that toolkit now. So feel free to use the toolkit, but for now, at least the button will stay for a while.
It makes sense.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So I will help the student to go in that direction, trying to reduce the friction. And as soon as we get some new alphas out there, then I will try to test some extension to see what's the consequence of some of the well used or used by lots of people extension. True, Nick. I could start thinking about that a bit more too. So Nick is writing in the chat that it may be interesting to have some in-browser debug message saying informing about deprecation. So that would help testing more than having to read the code and the migration doc.
We did this late in the life cycle of Notebook 5 that we added a message on startup, I think in the terminal, that said like, hey, this version of Notebook is deprecated and will be end of maintenance soon. The challenge, of course, is that you actually have to upgrade Notebook 5 to the newest patch version to see that. And the other challenge of those kinds of deprecation warnings is that a lot of our users, and I see this every week in triage, are using like shared instances where even though they would like to upgrade, they are not empowered to do that. They're using JupyterLab like because their school uses it or their organization, their company uses it. So we already have that notification on startup that like, would you like to get notified? And if you say no, you wouldn't get the deprecation warning. I don't think we have any numbers. Someone was asking me about this recently. I don't think we have numbers of what percentage of people have opted in for that. Is that right, Frederick? Like we don't know what the ratio is of people opting into notifications.
Yeah, we don't.
I mean, it's realistically, I come from a world where people need telemetry for everything, and open source, like that love of collecting data for any arbitrary reason is not shared, and I respect that. But like deprecation warnings are still useful, and if people have opted into it, I agree with Nick that like that would provide value.
Nick is raising also a good point that we could proxy the debug message behind some method and having a settings that by default make them silent so that we can make the like a dev mode or debug debug log level inside the UI. Yeah, sounds great to have that. I like the loud deprecation that you're proposing, Nick, in the chat. So that's all for me.
All right. So Mike is next on the agenda, but he asked me to jump over him in the queue. I'll fill as much as I can because I don't have a whole lot to say. But I can drop into the chat. There's a pull request that I just opened up, which I would recommend that folks take a look at if you have opinions about the UI. This is something I've been discussing with folks on my team about the file browser, of moving the file filter out of the toolbar and instead having the toolbar have a filter button that will cause that filter to appear. This is primarily geared towards JupyterLab, but I'm also curious about other people who are using this, like in Notebook or other applications to see how you like it. Um, I promoted this from draft to ready for review yesterday afternoon. It's been in draft for a few weeks, getting feedback. I noticed that Mike left me some comments overnight. I have not gotten the chance to act on those yet because my day is just getting started. But if anyone else would like to take a look at that, play around with it, give feedback on it, I would love to hear about that. So that's my plug. I'm planning to make a couple of other changes to file browser, but I don't have anything to show you just yet. Mike, are you ready to go next?
Yep, sure. And thank you very much for that pull request. It it looks like a very nice exploration. I think that many users will like this improvement. My comments, although many are mostly focused on the code rather than on the UX.
Mhm.
So it's, yeah, if you have any questions on that, well, we might actually want to discuss that in a wider group as well, because uh, it would be very nice if that could use a command toolbar button, which is defined in schema, because then we would not be introducing a regression so that the filter button can still be removed. The thing is that currently the command toolbar button is just doesn't have like pressed state, but there is toggled on the command. So I wonder whether is toggled, instead of only adding Lumina mod toggled class, should also change the pressed state.
Yeah. I was very surprised by how the pressed state looked because I don't think I had seen or used toolbar buttons that quite behaved that way. So I agree we might want to use something that is more consistent with what users expect. Nick is dropping in some comments about potentially replacing with complementing a Git message widget. I mean, VS Code has a bunch of different widgets in the left sidebar that people may be used to. I'm not sure whether we should duplicate that or take inspiration from that, but I welcome everyone's feedback about that.
Okay, so moving to my agenda points, we have almost 90 pull requests, and there was a moment today where we had almost 100 in the review queue. That's partially on me because I had less time last 2 weeks, but I picked up some slack this week and cleaned up a lot of backport pull requests. So 3.6 branch in particular is passing again. We said that we will support security fixes until basically the end of the year. And for that to be possible, we need to have CI still working there. So if you are tagging pull requests for with a milestone, I would suggest that if that is a thing related to fixing CI, let's try to keep backporting that to the older branch for now. And I'm not saying that because I want to reprimand anybody, because I myself did that mistake and had to go back and backport some of my older pull requests. So yes, seconding Frederick's point, please do review pull requests, not only those which are labeled as needs review, but any pull request that you think is appears to be ready. Maybe we could actually even use some minutes after the recorded part if we still have time to go through the older pull requests. And moving on, I've opened another pull request related to inline completer, and I also opened up lots of issues on Jupyter AI. I will try to fix them, some of them myself, but yeah, I'm looking at the inline completer again, and user experience there is not ideal because in Notebook we have a limited amount of space available in each cell, and if there is a multi-line completion suggestion, that starts to expand the editor in height, and that can be pretty annoying to the user if there is lots of drastic changes. So I can share my screen to demonstrate a couple of solutions that I was trying out, and I hope that it will not crash. I mean, that the Zoom will not crash. It usually does when I try to share my screen. How is it? Too small?
Can you,
Yeah.
yeah, font size looks all right.
Okay. So if I start typing, I get some suggestion. The new addition is that there is a setting. By default, it's the defaults here are out of date, but by default it will be set to 0, which means no collapsing. But here I have set it to 5, and let's get something back. It limits the size of the completion to these 5 lines until I hover over this indicator mark. So the alternative is that it could expand whenever I hover over the existing suggestion, but because it's not necessarily predictable and the user pointer will be always or very frequently over that suggestion anyways, that would be maybe not the best idea. And having this little kind of button-like which you do not have to click seemed better to me in my exploration. It might not be the best solution either. Maybe that's some more ideas to explore if anyone would like to try it out. I would appreciate feedback, but I think that's already something that we can merge. So let's disable that for now. Let's say just 100 and say use this one. I will change the completer. What do I use? Let me go back to OpenAI GPT-4. Save changes, and I will enable streaming. Where is it? And it's more tricky with streaming enabled. Oh yeah, there is a bug in Jupyter AI that it repeats the prefix when streaming. Can I get some more? yeah. So you've seen how it resizes and why the limitation is useful, but maybe I should increase that to 4. So I'm basically asking to reserve 4 lines of text, and there is less initial jitter because already when it starts streaming, it expands to at least 4 lines. And when it gets, I think, more useful is when we can set this equals to be these numbers to be equal. So reserve 4 lines and limit to 4 lines, and then the jitter and the resizing is much more limited because it reserves 4 lines and it stays at up to 4 lines. And there's
But I
more
noticed
settings.
with the, oh, sorry. I
Go
noticed
ahead.
with the previous demo that you had that the language model was producing like code blocks with commentary. And I'm wondering if it would be at all possible to like extract those code blocks and offer, I don't know, a menu choices of how to import. It's,
Yep. So
go ahead.
that's because many of these models are not fine-tuned for completion. So there is just a handful of models which are available from Jupyter AI, which were trained and fine-tuned for the completion of code tasks. I have a different provider of completions, which is Transforms from Transformers.js, and it has models such as Tiny Scooter Coder, Pi, or Wizard Coder, which do not make this kind of a mistake. So disobeying the instructions that are given in the prompt. But in Jupyter AI case, yes, that there is already some pre-processing going on. So if they provide the backticks, which indicate that it's a code within Markdown, we are trying to remove them and we are trying to remove the prefix. But that's of course subject to few further improvements and future iterations. So let me actually switch to. So I will disable Jupyter AI provider. Can have multiple providers enabled and they will show multiple suggestions, but I want to limit the results to the transformers just now because it will help me demonstrate something else. So I want to disable this setting. I have reserved space for the longest candidate. And now while it is streaming, you might see, if we are lucky, yep, when I'm switching between completion candidates. Okay, that's I don't want this one too. Some of them will have empty space for a while because it's just trying to keep the space, the empty space at the end, so that the longest of the completions fits. In that case, it's annoyingly generated one completion and stopped there, and the other has some additional text. So yeah, that's a demonstration of how it could work. And the final one is best demonstrated using yet another provider, so history provider, because that reliably produces the same result. Let's say have this, and if I type X, it collapses, but I made a typo, and I'm removing that X again. So what I want to do is to have this empty space reserved for a little while, and this is the default actually. Let's set it to 2 seconds by default. Already it is at 1 second. So if I press X and remove, it stays, the empty space reserved stays up for a while. So if I just press X and wait for 2 seconds, it will collapse itself. So these are like, yeah, suggested solutions to the problem. Maybe we don't have to ship all 4 of them, but because they are all optional and will be, most of them are disabled by default, except for the one which is already shipped. I think it's safe to include them.
So if you set that to say 0, would it just never resize then?
No, it will always resize. So
Oh, if you always
the,
resize, okay.
so
Immediately. Okay,
it
I get it.
disappears. Yeah.
I'm very curious about how users will feel about this.
So from what I know, users were complaining about the frequent resizing. So anything that reduces that would be better. But which of these solutions is optimal in everyday work? I am yet to learn that myself. So this is in the pull request, which I'm linking in the chat. And because that pull request also depends on another pull request which needs review, I'm linking that one too, and would appreciate if anyone has time to look at it, because that would minimize the diff and make reviewing this one easier.
Any other topics for on the record discussion? 'Cause I think we're at the end of our agenda here. All right, not hearing any, so I'll allow some time for off the record discussion. So I'll end the recording. Thank you everyone for participating today. We'll see you next time. Brace yourselves, folks on the call in 3, 2,